Kurt, for this time in PBT Extra, let's go straight to the Western Conference Finals. Dallas won one game. And this is a pretty interesting one because Luka, once again, almost triple-double, but they were up by 29 points at one point. They got a win. Now they're going to Game 5. What did you think about that Game 4?
You know, sometimes, Corey, the best adjustment you can make is just make the shots that you've been taking all series and missing. Like, they were shooting under 30% from three coming into the series, or with 32%. They really weren't knocking down their threes in those first three games. Luke was getting in the paint still. He was kicking it out, but the shots weren't falling. That changed. And I think a little of that might be desperation. A little of it's just regression to the mean, right? Like, I think that played a role. I'm not sure if that was the sharpest version of the Warriors we've ever seen, Corey. But, I mean, do you think Dallas has a real shot to, like, come Game 5 now? Do you think they've got a real shot to come back?
No. But I also thought they had no shot to beat the Suns.
Yeah.
So I think at this point, like, it's kind of like they're playing with house money. They're just saying, look, like, what do we have to lose? Luka says that we believe we can win. I understand that's what you're supposed to say. You posture the media accordingly. But the fact of the matter is that when you look at that Golden State team, there were defensive breakdowns. You listen to Coach Kerr's comments post-game. It's like you can't let that team get into a rhythm from the three-point line, and that's exactly what they did. And when you have Luka Doncic being the one who can take a double team and find Reggie Bullock, and he hits 6 threes, it's kind of like, come on. So my whole thing is, can you replicate that performance again, understanding that the Warriors reserves ate into that lead and made it a 7-point game at one point, giving them a real chance to win it, where they were like, maybe we should put back Andrew Wiggins and Steph Curry and Klay in the game. And they did. And they almost got the win. So from my perspective, I think we're just kind of barely hanging on here.
Yeah, I get a feeling even if they hit some more threes in Game 5, it's going to look more like Game 6 against Memphis, where the Warriors let the Grizzlies. I mean, the Grizzlies played hard without John Morant, and credit to them for all the work they put in. But got to the fourth quarter of that game, and the Warriors said, "All right, buckle. Like, we have another gear. Let's shift this thing up. Let's get serious." And they took it away. I got a feeling Game 5 is going to be like that, because if you're the Warriors, you know what you're looking at. We play on Thursday. We close this out at home. We don't get on a plane. We don't play again for a week. There's no game. The NBA Finals are set for June 2nd. That's 1 week off for Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and Draymond Green, and everybody else has got bumps and bruises too. But those old bodies could use a week off to get right. I think they realize the importance of that and not having to get on a plane to go back to Dallas. And I think you're going to get a very serious Warriors team on Thursday night.
And that's a fantastic point, because I think that's the idea that clicked in Coach Kerr's mind towards the end of that game. It's like, wait a second, if we close this out now, I mean, any competitive advantage at this point in the playoffs, every team's good. And that's why I think is so interesting about this series is, yes, it's unlikely that the Mavericks can, come back and win, but they can win one game. They have Luka Doncic. He's made 3 back-to-back first-team All-NBA teams. He's not even 24. He just turned 23 in February. He's on a short list with Kevin Durant and Tim Duncan, So it's like that caliber of player. Of course, you're going to get 1 or 2 games here. This is great basketball. Some of the greatest teams, in the whole league at this point. So you need to be able to close out. And it's not going to be an easy thing, like you mentioned with the Grizzlies even. It was not easy to do that. So I think that's important. But, yeah, I'm with you. If you get a week off, and you probably know that Eastern Conference Series, that's probably going to go the distance. And the thing that the Celtics also endured, the series against the Bucks, like that's a huge competitive advantage if the Celtics go through.
Especially the way those Eastern teams are beating each other up.
Yeah, I cannot agree with you more. So let's just go there. Why don't we, Kurt? So let's just think, what do you think about this Eastern Conference Series so far? It's been a little lopsided, hasn't it, where it's kind of been close and then blowouts? Alternating. Why is that?
It has been a really kind of, I think, a sloppy series. A kind of injuries have certainly played a role. Look, Game 3 with Jimmy Butler in the role. They're up by 26, and he can't play the second half, and it's a game at the end, right? Like, it's just been a lot of sloppy basketball where teams just haven't been consistent. Part of it is, frankly, it's really this for me. These are two elite defenses. These are two of the best defenses in the NBA. It is going to be very difficult to score on them. I think we've learned Miami can't really score on Boston in the half court. They just, if they're not getting some turnovers, they're not getting out in transition, if Boston isn't sloppy with the ball and giving it to them, they're really struggling, especially with Jimmy Butler banged up, playing every other day, so he's not really getting right. Tyler Hero not healthy, and frankly, on down the line with them. I mean, not that the Celtics aren't banged up, but the guys they have to have in Miami in the half court are banged up. I just think Boston, if they don't mess around, they can close this thing out. I think they're the better team. They just tend to kind of get in their own heads and have these bad games, and Miami takes advantage. So I think that, honestly, Boston could get serious and close this thing out in 6. I'm just not sure they're going to be able to do that.
Yeah, look, the Heat culture is strong. And I think you look at the scoreline for Game 4, the Boston, like that blowout. It was 102-82. Tyler Hero isn't playing, like you mentioned. He's averaging 18 to 20 points a game. That's just like, that's his production. And it's a ball game if he's playing. And I think the injury point is, definitely well taken. I think also when I look at these two teams, it's interesting. You see them matched up as far as totals throughout the season. I mean, they're like toe to toe. Everything, all their season averages are just like it's almost, there's almost no difference here. And I could just go down the list, but two rebounds off, 2 assists off, 2 steals off, like everything down the whole list, field goal percentage from 3-point, like the whole, like free throw, everything is basically right there. The difference that we're seeing play out at this moment is the psychological part of basketball, the mental part of basketball. And I always talk to my dad about this, because when I was trying to ask him and all of his colleagues in the NBA who have played, what's the difference between college and NBA? They always say, look, everyone can play. Everyone can play. Everyone's athletic. But the difference is up here. How do you handle that, especially at this crucial part of the season? And we're starting to see not only just the fatigue, like you said, Jimmy Butler is battling injuries. He's been battling injuries since the beginning of the playoffs. So a night off, a half off, how does that affect the team dynamic? And they don't look good when Jimmy Butler's not on the floor. So you have to also put that into consideration from Coach Spoelstra's perception. He's like, okay, well, dang, what can I do? And then also look at Jason Tatum evolving into one of the league's best, all that pressure with the Celtics name. You look at who's hanging, whose jersey are in that arena, like Larry Bird, and he's doing things that put him on a short list with those kind of players. And he's trying to take that organization to the top, and he's early 20s. So we're starting to see the human side of basketball. On paper, these two teams, it's very even, but we're seeing the lopsided effects because of the human frailty that, that makes basketball interesting.
Yeah. And Tatum can't have another 10-point game. Like they need him to be, they put the ball in Jaylen Brown's hands more, but he's a little sloppier as a ball handler. That's the turnover game that lets Bam Adebayo get going. The other thing that I think is key for Boston is keeping Robert Williams III able to play even 20 minutes a game, because what he does to energize their defense. And Bam, in particular, loves those little floater, jump hook, whatever you want to call it, from about 5-7 feet out, right? He kind of gets in and he floats right over the top. And Robert Williams is athletic enough to challenge those. And suddenly you see him kicking those out and thinking, oh, I better not take this now. Daniel Theis doesn't have that impact on him. They need Robert Williams out there for some of those minutes just to kind of take away the easy points in the paint. If Boston just takes away the easy points in the paint, in transition, the open buckets for Miami really struggles to score. Look, not only are Jimmy Butler and Tyler Hero their best shot creators outside of Kyle Lowry. Kyle Lowry's in that mix too. They're probably 2 best tough shot makers, right? Mm-hmm. They're the 2 guys who can hit the shot with the guy in his face and bodied up, and they still are able to get that shot off. And in the playoffs, you got to have that guy, Corey. You've got to have that guy.
Yeah, I always think you got to have a couple guys. You got to have, an energy guy. That's important. You got to have, the absolute killer who, like you said, blood in his veins, doesn't matter. Can you get me a shot off? You know, you got to have shooters. But that one guy, can you get me a shot off? It's interesting. Not every team, their 1A is not always that person. And I think that's like the interesting thing about the Bucks, for instance, is that Giannis is a machine, but Chris Middleton is the I need a shot off guy, and then you have the defensive clamps, which would be Drew Holiday. So I think for this team, you're right. It's the Heat's guy. Their alpha, their 1A is Jimmy Butler. Their tough guy shot is, tough shot guy is Jimmy Butler. And if he's for whatever reason, if he's not 100%, and that's really problematic.
It is problematic. And by the way, I think one of the reasons you're seeing that up and down and just blowout series is them play, and it's coming up a lot around the league, is having the conference finals guys play every other day, travel included. When first round, remember, Jimmy Butler was having the knee inflammation issues. He took a game off, but he had 2 days before and 2 days after. So 5 days where he could get treatment and get that thing right. That's not, now the stakes are higher now, but he doesn't have that kind of break. And I think that there's going to be a push to find, the TV networks might not like it, but a push to find a way to get a break in there a little bit, because, I mean, now you get to the 5, 6, 7, they're traveling between all these games. There's just a lot less recovery going on.
Yes, this is a game of attrition at this point. And like you said, when you think about Marcus Smart, for instance, and him recovering and being able to do what he does for that team versus Jimmy Butler, those are two. Giving you a 50-point, 40-point, 30-point game and 10 assists is a little different than being a defensive player of the year, as far as like with the wear and tear on your body and how much your team needs you. Because Marcus Smart, in his absence, people can step up. You mentioned Robert Williams III, like how he drastically changes the decision-making process. Because at the end of the day, in defense, you basically want to be like an offensive player, in the sense that you want to force them to react to you. So if you can make them think twice, they're the ones playing defense, even though they have the ball in their hands. And that's what Robert Williams has showed us in this series. But yeah, how do you make up for lost time, and what does 5 days mean to someone like Jimmy Butler? The answer is a great deal. So now I want to take you to the front office, Kurt. Tim Connolly is now the new team president of the Minnesota Timberwolves. This is massive. What they've been able to build in Denver is, among the league's really best organizations as far as culture and talent development is concerned. What do you think this move does for Minnesota, who has a really nice young core around Karl Anthony Towns, who's an all-star, and Anthony Edwards, who's really impressing a lot of people, particularly in this playoffs?
Yeah, and look, they've taken a step, but now they're at a point where they've got the hard step is next, right? Like, all right, we've got a couple good players. How do we fit the role players around them to coach the system that we want to make this work? Chris Finch has looked really good as a coaching hire. Conley's built this, right? He has built a sustainable model, and he's proven to be good in the draft. I mean, not just Jokic at 41, but good farther down in the draft, good at evaluating talent with who fits around who. This is a Timberwolves want to change the culture pickup, right? Like this is as big a move as they're going to make this offseason, whatever happens with, hey, move D'Angelo Russell or whatever else they're talking about. This is, to me, the new ownership group. This was, Alex Rodriguez and company going, hey, we're going to make a change. We are going to change this Timberwolves culture. I don't know how much they're going to be able to do short term. Like, I don't know that this radically changes them next season, but it's a great move for building 2 years out, 3 years out, 4 years out, when he starts really being able to find the right guys, make a couple good draft picks, pick up some people. I think it's look, they poached him at big money. They doubled his salary, but he's the kind of culture setter who's worth it.
Yeah, I mean, 5-year deal, $40 million. That includes ownership equity. So this is just an aside briefly before we get into the timeline question. I think that this is the way that contracts should work with franchise players. Wouldn't that be interesting? Like this idea of why can't you have ownership equity if you're a player? The team president does, and they move around. I don't understand why a player couldn't, particularly when you're investing $250 million into somebody. Wouldn't you want them to be equal partners at some level versus the trend of letting people retire and then inviting them into your ownership groups? So I think that this move is where contracts should go for players in the future. But an aside nonetheless. If you want to comment on that, you can, or we can get straight into the time horizon.
I think it would be interesting. I think the Lakers tried to do that with Magic back in the day. I think with legacy type of players, It's an interesting idea. Look, I don't want to do that with Kyrie Irving. I don't want to do that with James Harden. Guys who are bouncing around a little, but there are the legacy. Would the Lakers have done that with Kobe?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If you think about a player like you think about who is the face of a franchise. Someone like Tim Duncan in San Antonio or Giannis in the Bucks. You think about, okay, those are the type of players where even Jason Kidd with the Mavs, he came back to coach. He's been such a big part of that. His name's on the court. Like, they're playing basketball on the court. I'm like, oh, there's Kidd. So it's just like those type of players that mean so much to an organization. I think it's just good business. And I think it would actually be a pretty interesting way to continue that tie and that loyalty, because players want to be owners. It's very clear, right? They want to have move. They want to be in the front office. They want to have those conversations. And we're seeing more and more players have success as, immediately coming straight out and being named head coaches. I think this whole concept of, well, what does our relationship with our franchise look like, in an ambassador role? It's almost like being a brand ambassador. And instead of just cutting you a check for $250 million for the next 5 years, let's think about the average career now is a little longer. People are playing, and LeBron's approaching 20, it's 20 seasons. If you think about 3 or 4 contracts down the line, instead of minimizing, instead of going the route of like a 2 or 3 max year deal like we've seen Chris Paul do, for instance, why not say, look, we want to keep you here for 20 years. We'll give you an ownership stake. And it's like a mixture of Tim Connolly with like a franchise player mixed in with like Udonis Haslem. It's like, if you just put all that together, I think that's what you should reserve for players like Luka Doncic or Giannis or John Morant or Jason Tatum in today's league. Because the role of like player freedom, I think, is getting to a point where it's like upending everything. Have Kawhi Leonard and James Harden. There's so many people, there's so many examples of like entire franchises kind of being upended by a 3 or 4 year contract or forcing your way out of a trade. This might be one way to combat that.
Be interesting. By the way, I don't think this hurts Denver that much short term. Calvin Booth steps right in. Look, they get healthy next year. We've talked about this. You get Murray back. You get Porter Jr. back. The core is there. It's continuity because Booth has been in the front office. Long term, it's going to raise some eyebrows, right? Because Masai Ujiri got bought, and hey, we're not got bought, but like, hey, we're going to give you a lot of money. Would you come run us Toronto? Konisevich in Chicago, now Conley. At some point, that attrition hits your organization, but with Calvin Booth there, I don't think it's in the short term. This is still a team that walks into next season a contender.
Yeah, I would actually disagree a little bit, Kurt, because I've seen this play out in San Antonio, where if you have a place where if I go to Denver 5-10 years from now, I'm going to become team president and sign a 5-year, $40 million contract with equity. That actually attracts a lot of talent because you see it as a training ground. That you're not going to go to the very top there, but like you might be a Taylor Jenkins. You know what I'm saying? You might be someone like, so down the road, Monty Williams. So that's kind of like I think that's the allure, where if you look at it, I think a prudent, wise, and exceptionally talented person who's looking in the NBA and saying, I want to be a GM one day, you look at what they've done, Masai Ujiri and Tim Connolly, 2 of the best GMs in the NBA. You think, okay, well, actually, let's think about this for, 2 of the top executives in the NBA. You think, okay, well, I'll go there, I'll apprentice, they're doing something right, and then I'll, get my chance in 5 or 10 years. I think I think this is almost marketing for the Denver Nuggets in that sense. And then for the Minnesota Timberwolves, like you said, a culture shift, which is a perfect time because Karl-Anthony Towns is starting to really accept his role as a star. And Anthony Edwards, I think, is one of the most raw, just like pure energy talents that if you can just channel them, it could be interesting. So now I want to take your attention to the Lakers. I feel like we always talk about the Lakers. It's hard not to when you bring up the NBA. There's a new head coach search. What have you heard? Who do you think are the top candidates?
Look, publicly, they've basically let it be known that there's 3 people in the finals, 3 people getting second interviews, 3 finalists. Terry Stotts, the former Portland coach, Darvin Ham, the Milwaukee Bucks assistant, and Kenny Atkinson, the former Nets coach, currently an assistant, still working this year with the Golden State Warriors. Darvin Ham's considered the front runner. And I honestly think it's the right call among that group. Atkinson and Stotts are really smart basketball minds and can be really creative coaches. Stotts is a great offensive mind. I think when you're talking about the Lakers, it's a little less X's and O's because, hey, LeBron's going to run pick and roll and you've got to be able to manage personalities. You've got to have the gravitas and the presence to manage the personalities in that locker room and coach them. And that's what Darvin Ham, who was a Laker assistant for a while, brings to the table. He is a former player that when you talk to Milwaukee Bucks players about him, they gravitate towards him, they respect him, and they fear him just a little bit because he is tough and he doesn't hold back on anybody. I think that's the guy the Lakers of the people mentioned the Lakers need. I know that they tried to talk to Juwan Howard. I had heard before he was never leaving Michigan with his two sons there. Like he's going to coach them. Not the NBA is probably in his future, but not right now. I heard that there was reports they're still waiting to see if maybe Doc Rivers decides to leave. Doc Rivers, between you and me, Corey, Doc Rivers got $24 million guaranteed in Philly. You think he's walking away for anything? That's a lot of money to walk away from. So I got a feeling it's going to be Darvin Ham. And by the way, Corey, yes, it's a first-time head coach, so that's a risk. But I think this is the best fit.
It's interesting because, like you said, this isn't necessarily an X's and O's thing. It's the team that just won a championship a couple of years ago, and they still have Anthony Davis and LeBron James. And LeBron's coming off one of the best seasons statistically of his career, which is shocking. It's just amazing. So I think you're right. What we saw last was this idea of, well, where's the accountability? And it just kind of fell apart real quick, went off the rails. So when I think about the Lakers, I think you have two different things where you're looking at the time horizon. You're like, okay, well, for LA, we have to, one, keep up with, the Joneses, which is hire an ex-player. Like, look at Jason Kidd there in the Western Conference Finals in his first year. Monty Williams, Coach of the Year, back-to-back years, right? So there's this idea of, okay, well, ex-players are having tremendous success right now. Coach Kerr is probably one of the sterling examples of that.
In Boston.
Yeah, Ime Udoka as well. So like all the top teams, with the exception of one, ex-player. So you see this trend happening in the league, but I do think it's almost like when you have like a social media app where it's like, okay, Snapchat has stories and then Instagram does stories and Twitter does stories. It's like, how quickly can we copy this concept? But you don't always do it as well as the original innovator. So I think from my perspective, if they're going to follow that trend, it has to be the right fit. It has to be something that they can do long-term because that position, Kurt, I love Harry Potter. That position is like Defense Against the Dark Arts. Like every year, it's like, okay, like who's safe? Frank Vogel won a championship. He didn't even last for a couple of years. It's kind of like, what do you have to do? You have to be Phil Jackson. Like, what do you have to do to keep that job? So I think if they rush into it, they're just going to continue the churn and follow the trend. And then in 2 years, we'll be having this conversation again.
And really, Corey, how much of this, look, they're going to hire whoever they hire as the coach. Is it about the coach, or how much of this is really going to end up being about the roster moves they've got to make this summer? By the way, Corey, a lot of buzz coming out of their camp about their willingness to keep Russell Westbrook on next year.
Interesting. Why?
I think because there's not a good deal for him. Like they don't want to just buy him out. And if you're not going to buy it, just waive and stretch him and just eat the money.
It's when you look at some of those free agency signings, you can kind of tell there's like, generally speaking, okay, well, in 20 or so games, I think you can kind of tell, okay, if you're not one of our top two players, do you fit or not? That's a really interesting move because last season it didn't look like that experiment worked.
I still think, by the way, they want to trade him. The problem is every team knows they want to trade him, and they're not taking. If I want what, hey, Oklahoma City can absorb him. Well, and they waive him, but Oklahoma City can take him in. They're not going to do it unless you throw him a first-round draft pick. The Lakers don't want to give up their picks, and if they're not going to throw in a sweetener, I don't see how a deal gets done, barring some massive 3 or 4 team trade that moves a lot of pieces around.
That's interesting. Something to keep an eye out for. And last but not least, let's go to PBT Picks. Isn't this the best part of the show? So tell me what you think about NBA trade rumors, free agency buzz. I mean, let's just talk about it. What do you think are the biggest headlines? What's exciting you?
Well, I think the two interesting names out there, the two big interesting names, because I don't think, look, Kyrie Irving's going to, whatever that deal ends up being, he'll re-sign in Brooklyn, and Kevin Durant wants him there. The two big names that could switch teams, Zach LaVine lot of buzz out of the Chicago Combine about teams talking about Zach LaVine being poachable. He can get 150. He did not make an All-NBA team, so it's $157 million 4-year max from other teams, and he's going to listen. He'll probably end up having to be a sign and trade if he wants to go to a team to contend. But after everything Chicago did, bringing in Vucevic and DeRozan and Caruso and Ball to build a team that Zach wanted to stay for, there's a lot of talk about other teams thinking he could be gone. The other guy worth watching, Corey, DeAndre Ayton. After the playoffs, a lot of talk about, no, he's up for that. He's a restricted free agent. Again, they'll match and try and sign and trade him, but I don't know how. There's a lot of talk that the Suns aren't. They saw what they were getting out of JaVale McGee, and then they watched DeAndre Ayton, and they're thinking, do we need to pay him $30 million? I mean, do you think he's a max guy? Would you pay max money for DeAndre Ayton?
In short, no, but I do think his development is intriguing. And in the NBA, you look at a young player with that skill set, at the end of the day, he's 6'11". And I think there's room for growth. Name some guys who are 6'11" and have played in the NBA Finals, and kind of had the season totals he's had. And like I said, last season, we thought, okay, this might be a nice bargaining move for him. He was averaging 14 points and 10 rebounds. So, in the NBA, you average a 14-point double-double, you're making $20 million a year, which is amazing. Then you go to the next stage this season, 17 and 10. So you think, okay, the team dominated the entire year. His numbers are better. Why isn't he there yet? And I think it's kind of been the story of his career to this point where we have outsized expectations for the player that we think he could be. We think he's like, who knows, like one of the best centers, like almost like a Jokic or an Embiid or something, that kind of caliber of player. And what he's been giving us so far is somewhere between, 14 to 18 points, double-doubles, right around 10. So I think the expectation setting game with DeAndre Ayton has not played favorably for him. But I do think the biggest thing that he has going for him was his time with Chris Paul. And I think you take away Chris Paul, and I'm not as pro DeAndre Ayton. Without Chris, he doesn't seem like he's a max player. With Chris, I'm like, man, this guy's unstoppable. And that's the biggest kind of criticism against Ayton at this point.
That's why if he goes somewhere, I wouldn't be shocked if it's Charlotte. They need a big man, and LaMelo Ball isn't Chris Paul in terms of veteran savvy and style, but he is an elite point guard that you can run pick and roll with, who can get him the ball inside for lobs. And they've got some other driving. They need a center. It's an interesting fit. But I'm kind of with you. I don't know if I want to pay $30+ million a year for. Look, DeAndre Ayton was good this year. He is a good center. Don't get me wrong.
And the upside is huge. And that's what I'm saying.
But you're betting upside.
Yeah. But I think, Kurt, at the end of the day, like when I look at what Chris Paul, look at DeAndre Jordan, look at Blake Griffin, players who have played alongside Chris Paul look phenomenal alongside Chris Paul, and then you take them outside of that, and it's kind of like, it's just, so that's kind of the one thing that I think it's almost like a double whammy. As long as DeAndre Ayton's playing with Chris Paul, he looks great. I think he's going to get a huge payday. But if you don't, you look at the track record of really talented bigs who have played alongside him, and then later in their career do not have the same production. I think that's going to be a knock on Ayton, because we've seen him pre-Chris Paul, and so that's almost a preview. But I know there's a lot of room for development there, so I don't want to pigeonhole him. He's only 20. How old is he? This is his fifth season coming up, so he's so young.
He's still young, and there's still a lot of potential there.